I loved science fiction, but I was starting my career and worried about being pigeonholed. The performers felt like they were burning inside robot suits that reached over 130 degrees. On set, a 10-year-old boy was horrified and traumatized for life. The former Zorro had to lie live on TV. The leading lady, once a sign of wisdom, now served men. The galaxy didn't lose them. The bright lights on a Hollywood soundstage blinded everyone to their sorrow. Lost in Space, the 1965 American dream, was popularized during space conquest. A family of astronauts, a ship bringing faith, science, and morals into the stars. That fantasy began to crumble in the first days of production. No one talked about the crushing stress and wounds behind the happy scenes. These are 10 moments. The Lost in Space cast regretted filming 10 times when Hollywood's wasn't bright enough to erase the real darkness. 1. My name is John Robinson. Guy Williams embodied justice. He was Zorro, the masked knight who fought for justice. That hero vanished a few years later behind Lost in Space's shiny astronaut outfit. His replacement was a picture-perfect father, always smiling, right, and lying to maintain his image. From the first season, Lost in Space replaced serious, contemplative episodes with cheap comedy, fake monsters, and hollow dialogue. Williams battled for his dignity. He strongly opposed to the writer's scenario where John Robinson lies to his wife and children to protect them. Scientist and father. Let him not lie. This is weakness, not power. CBS's response was final. The American father is never wrong. Williams read the lines, but something shattered inside him. After that, Lost in Space was no longer science fiction. It promoted a false ideal. He was utilized by Hollywood to teach morality after becoming a symbol of freedom. Glory couldn't erase his remorse. John Robinson was loved by the audience, but Guy Williams hated him. He admitted in an interview following the show that he thought a role was where I displayed my beliefs. In this one, I had to hide them every day. He named Lost in Space the gilded prison with a soul inside. Fame preserved his name. But it also made him feel like he'd betrayed his inner hero. Williams said, Lost in Space wasn't a journey through the stars years after leaving Hollywood to live alone in Argentina. It was his gradual disappearance under moral pretense. Williams, his closest co-star, also regretted. One that comes from losing a part in a generation of Hollywood women's voices. 2. June Lockhart, who observed Hollywood's female discrimination. And worked on a script for a long time, but it was never right, and June Lockhart was born into performer families. Her parents were established MGM performers and she grew up among screenplay stage lights and discourses about morals and human decency. She joined Lost in Space with a simple belief. Women can lead scientists, not simply support them. 60s Hollywood didn't want to hear that. Lockhart recommended Maureen Robinson participate on scientific missions, handle perilous situations, or wield a star map from the initial production meetings. The room laughed before someone said, "A woman can't be a credible scientist." She spent the rest of the shoots in the galley, smiling, baking, and asking her husband, "Are you sure, John?" While the soldiers explored, fought, and discovered, Maureen Robinson could only serve meals in space. Lockhart initially told herself it was the era. Although she taped longer, she realized she was lying. She hated the idea that mild and subservient women were valuable. "I wanted Maureen to be a model for women," she said, but instead, she became proof of how limited we were allowed to be. June Lockhart was in her 70s when Hollywood introduced heroes like Ripley Alien and Dana Scully from The X-Files. She watched the film silently, then whispered, "If I'd been stronger, Maureen may have been the first off that ship." She regretted her silence when rebellion could have altered everything, not the role. As Hollywood's ideal American mother, she was polite, courteous, and motherly throughout her life. On that same scene for another actor, regret changed when actual attachment was disallowed. 3. Actress Marta Kristen regretted Hollywood banning love. Watching the show, we sometimes bite our lips from giggling, trying not to chuckle. Lost in Space was excellent for the moment. In Lost in Space, Judy Robinson was flawless, graceful, and poised. She smiled at the correct times, stared wistfully into the distance, and kept an impeccable distance from Major Don West, but everyone on set could feel something real between them that the script couldn't contain. Marta Kristen said, "They removed some wonderful scenes, glances, touches, and breaths without words. The audience might think about sex, they worried. CBS wanted Lost in Space to be a family show, so women couldn't adore it. To the network, emotion can confuse morality. Judy Robinson was frozen like a smiling statue, stripped of any emotion. Marta later claimed in an interview, "I felt like a doll in a glass case, lovely yet lifeless. Love, closeness, and everything real frightened them." She regretted not pushing back and saying love is not harmful for television. She claimed, "I would have preserved one gaze, one touch if I were stronger. But I let them obliterate my feelings." Kristen understood Lost in Space was harsh years later when she viewed films about women loving and hurting. It banned human emotion. "I used to think I was alone in loneliness. I understood we couldn't love in that environment." Marta Kristen regretted silently accepting a world without feeling, not censorship. Love was forbidden in Lost in Space, and no narrative could fill that void. Show cruelty continued after her. It then stole a 10-year-old boy's childhood, even more vulnerable. For real explosions stole Bill Mooney's youth. "If I were in the robot, I'd take any chance to leave. Cut, alright, let me go." Bill Mooney was 10 when Lost in Space began filming. He rapidly became television's golden boy with his brilliant eyes and easy charm. His youth practically burned behind the camera. The crew employed genuine explosions, tremors, and smoke to record toddler Will Robinson's responses as the spaceship shook. No effects or safety shields, just a scared boy standing amid blinding flashes and deafening fringe. "I was crying," Mooney remembered. "I was shaking as they yelled cut perfect. No one inquired about my health." Explosions haunted him for years. Adult Mooney had persistent insomnia, anxiety, and noise-triggered panic episodes, which he was diagnosed as post-traumatic stress from filming. "I may have been lucky to become renowned so young, but I lost my childhood." Mooney went lost in space, not in the cosmos but in adults who transformed his dread into comedy, like Will Robinson. "If I could go back, I'd still be an actor," he stated softly in an interview years later. "I request one thing. Please don't make my fear enjoyable." For Bill. Fame didn't cause Mooney regret. To appear childlike, he grew up too quickly. Mooney lost his innocence, but another guy lost his identity behind a performance the world laughed at. 5. Jonathan Harris. "I regret making my villain a self-parody. In retrospect, I did something dreadful." Dr. Zachary Smith was supposed to be a minor character in Lost in Space, a cold-hearted traitor who would die after 5 episodes. Jonathan Harris refused to leave quietly. He knew playing Smith as written would make him forgettable. He rewrote him on set. Harris gave the villain camp, elegance, extended vowels, and dread. Till Dr. Smith was famous. "I contributed foppishness, comedy, and my actual personality. They hated. But the audience enjoyed it," he claimed. "Fans loved watching Smith yell or faint in exaggerated fright each week." Harris laughed, but he realized he was on a knife's edge. CBS banned non-masculine TV conduct in the 1960s. The director requested retakes if he played Smith too soft or near to the robot. "Less fussy John. U.S. men don't act that way. Performing while hiding, living while pretending." Harris selected comedy as the only way to resist in a Hollywood that didn't accept individuality. Harris never claimed credit for Dr. Smith, which critics hailed as one of the first coded gay men on American TV decades later. He simply stated, "I was weary of acting. Only Smith could sustain me and prevent me from being myself." He regretted making fun of his loneliness and fear. Resented having to choose between being forgotten or misunderstood. He remarked near the end of his life, "I made a villain a legend. To do that, I had to lie about myself." If Jonathan Harris had to disguise his truth behind humor, another actor was buried in a role and a metal machine. 6. Giving Bob May the robot a soul cost us sweat and blood. Not a fancy effect or remote-controlled prop. The space robot was real and included Bob May. The metal and hard plastic outfit weighed nearly 200 pounds and had no ventilation. It regularly exceeded 130 degrees Celsius inside. Steam rose from his skin and studio lights drowned out his respiration. Bob remembered smelling his skin burning, but screaming would ruin the take. His face was never seen after the cameras stopped rolling. They saw him as the talking robot, not the man gasping between takes. May said years later that he had acute claustrophobia and used therapy for nightmares of being confined in darkness. A crew member joked Bob May died in that suit no one has opened. For May, that was no joke. A bit of him died inside that metal shell every day until the machine's creator was forgotten. His sorrow wasn't burns or bruising. People only remembered Robot Never Bob May. He informed fans at a fan event, "I was that robot's soul." However, they solely discuss voice, lights, and effects. No one talks about the sweating, hurting, inner man. Under the studio's bright lights, Lost in Space produced a revered mechanical icon. Behind that emblem was a genuine performer who risked his health, identity, and fame. So people would think the machine had a soul. Another individual on that set selected a different prison. He carried a silence made one for 20 years. 7. Major Don West, Mark Goddard, I had Lost in Space for 20 years. Mentioned being a detective and cowboy. I don't want to panic out in space. When Lost in Space debuted, Mark Goddard was in his early 30s, beautiful, athletic, and slated to be TV's next action star. He became a joke on the show he thought would make him famous. As scripts went from serious sci-fi to juvenile humor, Goddard reluctantly starred in absurd scenarios like arguing with a robot, chatting to singing plants, and getting lost on a soap bubble world. He later stated, "I believed my career was ended. Lost in Space was a vast playground, not the next Star Trek." After the series finished, Goddard removed Lost in Space off his resume. He avoided interviews, fan gatherings, and the show that made him famous out of shame. "It embarrassed me. I couldn't stand watching myself argue with a robot or shrub. I didn't want Don West remembered." That element of his life was buried for 20 years. Pride ruins, but time heals. Lost in Space became a cultural icon by the early 2000s. Goddard was rediscovered by new audiences and slowly realized that the show had given him purpose, not shame. After 3 years in space, he authored a confession and redemption memoir. "The more I concealed it out of shame, the more I realized it was the best aspect of my life." It wasn't the show that Mark Goddard regretted. Be ashamed of the delight he previously brought others. Because sometimes not laughing is worse. Mockery mocks what formerly made you happy. Like Goddard, another Lost in Space actor fell under its shadow no matter how far they went from Hollywood. 8. Angela Cartwright, Penny Robinson, the girl devoured by her past and adventure together, never expecting it to take off. Angela Cartwright was a child star before Lost in Space. She was Brigitta, the charming little child from The Sound of Music, a classic. She represented innocence and gladness once. Penny from Space was all anyone recalled a few years later. "Penny was my nickname for decades." Interviewee Angela revealed she misplaced her real name. Despite her several efforts, audiences saw the same Robinson girl locked on the Jupiter 2, never allowed to grow up. Every fan letter began with "Dear Penny, never." Dear Angela. She left Hollywood to work with cameras as an adult. She claimed she wanted to see the world through her eyes, not Penny's. The ghost of Lost in Space haunted her even after she became a respected photographer. She was invited to fanfares and requested to sign posters and smile with robot-dressed supporters. She smiled Penny's grin from millions of memories. Angela admitted on a panel, "Don't regret being on the show. I regret letting it define me. Was an artist. I became a symbol." Lost in Space made her famous, removed her freedom. Many kid stars paid the price to be loved worldwide but never allowed to be themselves. The man in the robot suit experienced a moment as unforgettable and more agonizing as Angela Cartwright's loss of her youth under studio lights. 9. Bob May, the robot, haunted by my child attack. The Robinson family was protected by the Lost in Space robot. In one terrifying occurrence under Dr. Smith's orders, the machine turned against the child it was supposed to protect. The brief scene raised one of television's first AI ethics problems. Who is at fault, the commander or the machine that obeys? Bob May, the 200-pound suitbound man, said filming the scene changed him forever. "Though I knew it was acting, I felt awful when the robot stretched its arm towards Will. My heart hurt when the boy screamed." The director originally shot the robot approaching on Will with flashing red lights for over a minute. CBS cut it immediately to avoid traumatizing children. American television in the 1960s wasn't ready to show a machine out of control or view itself in terror. May's performance was a wound for Bob. He remarked subsequently, "I felt I was making something wonderful. In retrospect, I see a man in armor hurting a youngster and saying it was his job." Critics called it the start of moral dilemma in AI on American TV. But Bob May saw it as the moment he stopped perceiving the robot as a character and saw it as blind obedience. Lost in Space had no genuine leader. Not the robot, actors, or directors. They were machine puppets. One where ratings ruled art and morality was a catchphrase. Toy Box Print. 10. CBS and Irwin Allen. When morality and art were distorted by commerce, Lost in Space was lauded as a brave, humanistic, and ambitious new science fiction icon after its first season. CBS saw money, though. While production costs were too expensive for a family show, robot toy sales soared. The network retaliated brutally. They cut the budget, eliminated the philosophical and psychological episodes, and forced producer Irwin Allen to turn the spacefaring drama about human heroism into a noisy, colorful camp sitcom for kids. Revolution turned into toy commercial. Guy Williams, who thought Lost in Space would be the space age's Zorro, said softly, "They terminated the show to sell toy robots." The cast knew that CBS sought safe numbers at the expense of their work's seriousness, depth, and humanity. Each episode was a 25-minute product ad. Laughter hid morality and profit distorted art. Despite losing in space, program creator Irwin Allen subsequently stated, their truest regret wasn't that. They watched as it was swallowed, turned from a dream about humanity and the stars into family-friendly, expensive escapism. Hollywood's greatest tragedy may be watching magic be sold by the pound, cast in plastic, and shrink-wrapped for profit. After CBS switched out the lights, Jupiter 2 stopped buzzing and the cast parted ways. No one understood Lost in Space was only starting to live. Laughter, falls, and seemingly innocent lessons from the stars were passed down to a new generation on flickering black and white TVs in American family rooms. The story continued for those who made it. They were stuck in their old roles that hurt them. They convinced millions that courage, love, and morality could endure in space. But behind the cameras, they realized morals can be changed. For a flawless photo, love and childhood can be taken out. Lost in Space was about a family lost in space. Losing themselves in Hollywood was the story behind the lens. Perhaps that was the voyage they never returned from. Leave a comment if Lost in Space changed your view of Hollywood. Like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to keep discovering the Dream Factory's forgotten secrets. We'll continue investigating Hollywood's hidden gems in future videos that were never meant to be seen.